Good morning. I am Pastor Crespo Jr., the research librarian and archivist here at the Bronx County Historical Society. And today I'm joined with Kenneth Banker and Glenn Hart, both volunteers or former volunteers at the Edgewater Park Volunteer Host Company number 1. The focus today is going to be the Edgewater Park Volunteer Host Company, but we would definitely like to gather some background information on both of you. And we'll begin with Ken Banker, and please briefly introduce yourself and tell us your relationship with the Edgewater Park Volunteer Host Company number 1.
My relationship with the fire department started when I was 18 years old. The only way you can get into the firehouse, you had to be 21 years old. Otherwise, if you were younger, you can come in as a buff, but your father had to be a member. My father didn't want to join the volunteer fire department. They took buffs in as young as 15 years old, and at 21 they got their member's badge. So I lobbied the members to let me in, and they finally let me in May of 1970. And I had to wait until I was 21 years old to get my full fireman's badge. Otherwise, I was a buff, they called us at that time. And I've been a member, it'll be 53 years this coming May, 2023.
Great. And just to clarify, the Edgewater Park Volunteer Host Company number 1 is the sole remaining volunteer fire department in the county of the Bronx.
Yes.
In the borough of Bronx. Great. Mr. Hart, could you just introduce yourself and let us know your relationship to the
my
host
name is
company?
Glenn Hart. I actually grew up in the Throggs Neck houses projects along Ferry Point Park in St. Raymond Cemetery, and moved to Edgewater in 1973 of August, and got my first taste of the firehouse. Ironically, my mother had a heart attack a month after we moved in, and we needed to have a medical call, and we lived 4 doors away, right behind the firehouse. So I knew of the firehouse. We ran the alarm, got my mother some care, and took an interest in the firehouse being so close to my house, a resident, and I had no friends in the neighborhood. So I knew they had drills on Sundays, so I would just hang out, sit on the steps, wait until they opened up the Bay Avenue doors. And they saw that I was doing it every Sunday, like clockworks. So a couple of the guys, Kenny Banker, one of them, and Bill Dunphy, and Steve Hansen took me in, and he said, "You want to help out?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So the first thing they did was, "Okay, you got to polish the Model T, brass." So they gave me a rag and a kit of brasso, and I started polishing the truck, and that's where I started my learning. But unlike Kenny, I was 11, 12 years old at the time, so I was way too young to even be a buff. So they saw that I was dedicated, so they made me a quote-unquote mascot.
Okay.
And that's how I become part of the fire department. It's from basically 1974 on until I left for New Jersey in 1996. And I learned a lot, I grew up a lot, and knew what I wanted to do as far as activities goes, and I grew up within the fire department. I learned some trades, learned how to drive the truck. I learned how to drive on a 1954 fire truck that they had, and it's been going on ever since. And when I moved out, grew up, had a family in New Jersey, and once my daughter's back out of school now, I got involved in the 100-year anniversary celebration and really started to get involved with the research of the firehouse.
Yeah, it was nice to see you there.
Yeah, thank you.
And Ken, the little thing is now doesn't really. So tell us a little about your family background prior to living in Edgewater Park.
I grew up in the South Bronx on Brook Avenue between 145th and 146th. Then we moved to Park Avenue for a while. We rented a house. Then we moved over to 201st right off of Marshallou Parkway. And then from there, we moved to Edgewater in 1967, the summer of '67. We moved there. My ancestral heritage and stuff is basically Norwegian, Irish, and Dutch. The Dutch part came over in 1654 and migrated to Harlem. That's where New York was mostly Dutch at the time, stuff like that. And then the family just evolved from there. My last name is spelled Banker, but the Dutch spelling is Bancker, and found out that they changed it to be more Americanized once they landed over in the colonies.
That's a great immigrant history. And you were how old when you first moved to Edgewater Park?
I was probably 15
Okay.
years old. I'm 70 now, so I've been there a long time. Yeah, we just had the 100th anniversary, so I joined the firehouse when it was 48 years in existence. So I've been there longer, 52 years of the 100-year anniversary and stuff like that. When I look at the memorial board we have in the main room, it was like a third of the past members, on the thing. I could remember every single one of the guys basically on that board, and we still got more to add. It's crazy.
Amazing. And Glenn, could you tell us a little about your family background prior to coming to Edgewater Park, and any reasons or your first knowledge of knowing that you were going to move to Edgewater Park?
Well, the other reason why we moved out of the Throggs Neck houses is that at that time they were very strict in their laws. You couldn't walk on the grass, you couldn't have pets. So my oldest brother, God love him, Billy, brought home a stray dog, but we kind of kept it on the QT until we got found out by housing management. So we were kind of forced to move out, and my parents already knew some people who lived in Edgewater. She actually played in the softball league, and that played in Edgewater, and they invited her to come down and take a look. And long story short, we moved to Edgewater with the dog.
The dog got a home.
Dog got a home, and with no harassment or anything, and it turned out to be quite a learning experience. I had, I would say that's the place where I came of age. I was going to be a teen at that time. Had no direction really. My father worked 2 jobs, and my mom was a housewife. So basically, I was left to find my own. And thankfully, the firehouse, we moved to the house that was directly right behind the firehouse, and I took an interest in that right away. And to learn that it was volunteer, and with the word volunteer and paid, that was exciting as well. And to find out later on in the years that there were still volunteer fire companies within the city of New York, and learning the history about why we're still in existence, because of the street size, because the city rigs couldn't get past the firehouse, so they would back us up and take over our responses. And just learning about the core history of volunteering is what made me really captivated with the firehouse. And I became officers on different levels, administrative both, and on the officer on the line, and I'm doing really well with it. I really enjoyed it. We went on muster trips to different fireman events throughout the state, and competitions. And then we decided to have our own in 1977 and 78, and just like you saw it for our 100th. And
it was a great event.
Yeah, it was. And I couldn't be happier to learn the knowledge, and actually to learn how to drive, basically, because my dad worked, like I said, 2 jobs, so the car wasn't available. So the members would take me up and say, "Hey, can you learn how to use a stick shift?" I said, "You're going to learn now." So it was good. It was good learning up, following up and cleaning up the fire truck after a call, learning how to roll up the hose, take care of the hose, take care of equipment. So it gave me a sense of value that not only got to take care of equipment, but you're taking care of yourself as well. You're learning. You're becoming a better person by being a volunteer and helping your community out.
That's great, and you know, these are experiences that a common New
Yes.
York kid,
Yeah.
you know, as you were back then,
Mhm.
didn't experience. So, what a unique upbringing. A little more on the community. Cooperative housing or co-ops in New York City is a common housing model, right, for apartment buildings. But I'd venture to say that not many New Yorkers have heard of or even realize that there are owner-cooperative housing communities,
Mhm.
you know, such as the 675 bungalow Edgewater Park. So can you tell us a little, Glenn, about the Edgewater Park community and how it was founded?
Well, it was founded. Well, I have to go back a little bit to when the AD family had bought the land and had an agreement with the Shaw family, and the Shaw family was coming out for vacations during the summer, and they realized they could lease the land to campus during the season, you know, late spring, early summer until Labor Day, and then it would become a you know, just to their own homestead again. And as it came about, some of the people started to stay around all year round and asked, from what I gathered, the Shaw family if they could start building permanent structures, and which became bungalows, which became, I believe, 3-season bungalows, because there was no indoor heating. It was all farmland, so there was no city connections to anything at that point. So their bathrooms were outhouses, I'm sure, or just outside the house, and their heat stemmed from fireplaces at the time, and or fire pits, which were coal fire pits back then. And slowly it just gravitated to being a year-round encampment, and became from Edgewater Camp, from a pop-up tent perspective to bungalows. So at some point in the late 50s, they changed the name from Edgewater Camp to Edgewater Park, and it sounded more elaborate. So, and the co-op version of that didn't come into being till the late 70s, early 80s, where Mr. Shaw decided he was going to retire. He was going to sell off the land to to the people who owned the houses. So in Edgewater, you owned the home, but you rented the land from Mr. Shaw, and so he was willing to sell the land back to the owners, and I believe a commission came up and formed a co-op society, for lack of a better word, and where it would be gravitated by a group of board of directors and administrative officials, and they would set the tone where each would get assessed on their property, and they would buy shares of the property, and then they would have their weekly or monthly board meetings and such, just to keep everything going, keep the place funded for repairs and maintenance of the park.
1987.
Yeah, 1987.
And
Yeah.
please can interject.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
about
he would know more.
1987 is where a group of community people formed a committee and sat down with the Shaw family and negotiated a price for the property. I think it was about $6 million, something like that. And and then we had our own board of directors get voted in every year. We have our own maintenance staff. We have our own clerical workers, and they're working at the old gas station, which is now really a beautiful office complex that they built. We actually had our own stores in the community. You didn't even have to go outside, basically, maybe to a supermarket now and then. Like I said, with the cooperative offices, which is called Epoch, that was a Texaco gas station.
Okay.
And then looking from the front to the left, you had a hardware store, a stationery store, and then the real estate, which was run by the Shaw family, where you paid your taxes and your land rent. And when you turned the corner from there, you had a candy store, a bakery, a dry goods store, a German delicatessen.
Construction company was in between,
Yeah, in between in between the bakery and the deli, and then you had the laundromat. Then you had a dry cleaners, which later became a carpenter shop. Then you turned the corner and you had a hairdresser, and you had
Little town.
you had a hairdresser. Then you had a shoemaker. Then you turned the corner into the alley in the back, the service alley. You had a barber shop.
Okay.
So the women went one place and the men went to another place.
It was great, but unfortunately, in 1979, it caught on fire, and it went to a third alarm, I believe. I think there was like 17 fire trucks there, and being that it was so old, the wood and everything, and the layers and layers of tar and tar paper on the roof, we knocked it down, we got it down, but the ovens from the bakery, that smoldered for over a week. It was a shame, and that like
We were putting water
that
on
killed
it.
that killed the community. I mean, that was the center point of the community.
We were putting water on that stove for good 7 to 10 days just to keep the heat down, so it wouldn't reignite the rest of the lumber from the building.
And there was no insurance on the stores and stuff. It was too high, or they couldn't be insured or something. And it was unfortunately the German bakery just changed hands to these two younger guys bought it, and they lost everything. Yeah.
And that's interesting. They talk about, shopping in all the different stores and that kind of self-contained town.
Exactly.
Recently visiting during the 100th anniversary of the Volunteer Host Company, it seemed like there was only one store. Where do tenants now kind of do their regular day-to-day shopping?
Yeah, outside. Everybody goes to supermarkets up on the avenue. We call it that Tremont, or Lower Westchester. The people shop. Yeah.
And Glenn, what's your earliest memory of the Edgewater Park community?
Well, I'll give you one better. I'll give you my first experience with the firehouse. So we had just moved in August of '73, and we weren't quite moved into the house yet, but my parents let us sleep in the house. And I'm sleeping in the front of the house, and the alarm goes off. And I jumped up. It sounded like a ship horn.
It is. Big air horn.
And I'm like, it shook me out of bed. I was scared out of my wits. I had no idea what was going on. And I got shaken. And I ran out of the house trying to figure out what was going on. It was for a medical call because it only rang 3 times. And I'm like, okay, I know I heard what I heard. And it sounded again 3 more times. And that was it. And I still didn't grasp exactly where it was coming from or what was going on until I realized that was the alarm for the firehouse. So that was my first experience in Edgewater with the firehouse. But I had some friends in there prior to them, and we played softball in the East Section ball field. I had some friends in there, but we mostly played in the East Section ball field or Throggs Neck Little League. So that's my earliest notion of Edgewater. But the firehouse, I'll never forget that day. So.
Yeah, it was
Some first memory.
Yeah, it's not unusual that air horn that we had. Trying to remember the name of it. They've had them around all over. There's actually a society dedicated to these air horns. It's like it's a big long trumpet, and it's pumped up by air.
Compressed
and
air,
we have 2 compressed air tanks down in the firehouse. We had, and then prior to that, you had a round hoop of metal where they banged with a hammer. That alerted the community because they were bungalows. We weren't airtight, so you would hear the gonging and stuff. Then during World War II, they put an air raid siren up on the tower, we call it. It's a square part of the building. And I heard they were using that, and then they were told they couldn't use that no more. I'm not sure when the air came in, but it had to be really early when they used it. Then it would become unreliable, tough to get parts for it. The diaphragm freeze up in the wintertime, the condensation from the tanks. We'd be out there with blow torches on ladders. We knew where it was all the time. It was in the elbow thing, trying to clear it. So then we went to a siren system. But prior to that, they had a small box on the front of the building. You pull that it was marked medical or oxygen, right? Oxygen. And the other one was a regular, looked like city box. If you pulled the city box, That
continuous.
rang until those canisters ran out of air. It would go from boom, boom to So, and then when you hit the oxygen box, that went off 3 times. So you knew it was a medical, not a fire. Then we found out some of the members weren't responding because they say, nah, medical, I'm not trained for that and stuff like that. So we took the box off. Now you had to guess what it was when,
You had to
when the
respond.
horn went off. That was
had to
called the
respond.
horn.
Yeah, you had to
you would
respond.
respond. Then we went to a siren system. And that's what we use today. It's a siren. Yeah, the air is no longer used. It's still up there, but it's no longer used.
It's part of the structure now.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when I moved out to New Jersey, real quick, I have to tell the story. I moved to Rutherford at that time, and it was right across the Passaic River. It's like one of my first nights out there, and I had the window open, and I heard the siren go off, and I immediately jumped up, thinking out, okay, wait a minute, I'm not in Edgewater anymore. It was a town across the river that had the same siren, and I thought I was in Edgewater again, so I had to jump up, put my shoes on, and say, wait a minute, I'm not getting my boots on now. I went back to sleep.
Yeah, and actually, out in City Island,
Yeah.
they could hear the siren and the horn travel across the water at Eastchester Bay. We're in between. And then the Long Island Sound's on the other side of the city. But they would hear our horn and hear our sirens and stuff that would travel across. That's how, I mean, it woke you up.
Yeah,
It woke you up.
that's for sure.
And nobody ever complained.
No.
You know, you didn't get, usually you get 670 howls. You always get, the horn, the siren going up. Nobody ever complained about that. And we've never missed a call in 100 years.
Then
There's always somebody around. Yeah, we have so many different workers. You know, guys work night shifts and stuff like that. Day shifts and weekends. You always got people and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
people that
we
worked
had
in the
cops and
park.
firemen, belong sanitation, belong to a lot of construction workers and stuff like. In the community, it's a mixed community and stuff like that. It's predominantly blue collar.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And about the community itself, can you describe in your own words the community? You know, how would you describe, living there and amongst the people you're with?
Family.
Yeah, it's family, definitely family oriented. We have so many different things that go on in the community, different organizations. We have ladies social welfare, ladies auxiliary fire department, the Edgewater Athletic Association, and of course the Edgewater Fire Department. The social welfare would find out about older people or people that had medical problems, and they would look in on them. They would bring food to the elderly and stuff like that. They'd have food drives. The ladies auxiliary fire department, they would run Halloween things.
Ragamuffin
They
parade.
just Ragamuffin parade that was just before Thanksgiving. Easter egg hunt in the community. The Edgewater Athletic Association would run swimming and running events that would last. It would start on Thursday night at the meeting, and then run all the way until Monday night. And we'd have 3 days of competition and give out over 200 medals and trophies to the children and the adults of the community with all sorts of long distance swim, long distance run races,
Rowing.
50-yard dishes, rowing boats, pie eating contests.
Egg rolling.
Yeah, egg rolling, potato peeling,
Potato sack
pancake
race.
flipping. Yeah, it's that's like that. That was brought about. It was the end of the summer, and that's when the people would go back into what they called the city, and leave their bungalows, board them up, and go back down into the city. So everybody got together for one last time. But it's still been going on for about 100 years. Technically not, but they're insistent. But we do research.
I found information
yeah.
to debunk that. But
Yeah,
we
we
won't
let
go
them
there.
we let them dream then.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
but
the-
they're close. They're probably in
Yeah.
the 90s, low 90s.
What was great about the EAEA, it really brought out the community, old and young alike. The festivities would start off with a baby parade, so you would make
Right.
baby
Floats.
floats to put the little kids 5 and under on, and they come up with whatever theme. I remember one theme was Star Wars. Star Wars was big in 1977. There must have been about 30 floats, and I would say about a third of them was all Star Wars related at that time.
Yeah.
So, and they were very crafty. These people were very
Yeah.
crafty. and
No bigger than 4x8.
Yep.
One sheet of plywood.
yep,
And had to be self-propelled. Couldn't
Yep.
be motorized.
no motorized.
And most of the time, every year, if something socially happened, political or something, or like Glenn was saying, a movie and stuff, you would get a float. You would get a float that was that took that theme on and stuff like that. And they do, yeah. It's
1976 was bicentennial year, so almost every float that year had something to do with America's 200.
yeah,
And the sail, they had the operation sail right off our shores.
yeah.
And along Island Sound. But what was good about the EAA's Labor Day races was the finale Monday nights when they gave out the awards. We used to have a DJ, and we have games of chance to help raise money for the funds. But the Firehouse also had their share of fundraisers. We would host almost monthly dances at the Firehouse, different themes: St. Patrick's party, Valentine's party,
Wine and cheese, country,
barn
Barn
dance, and
50s nights.
yeah, 50s nights was very big.
That was big.
And during the 70s disco, every Friday night to get the kids going and keep them off the street, we would have disco nights at the Firehouse. And with the DJ threw his services in, kids would come in. It was free to the kids. They just bought hot dogs and sodas, which was 50 cents, $1 each, whatever. It wasn't really used as a fundraiser. It was more to get the kids involved
Off the street.
and give them a little education of the Firehouse at the same time. So it was a double barrel. So and it was packed. And when I say it was packed, the hall was supposed to only hold 50, 60 people. You had close to 75, 80 people at any one time. So much so they would hang outside the Firehouse.
You didn't tell the fire marshal.
Who?
That's interesting that you brought that up. Sticking on that personal experience theme, you mentioned music and dances and parties. What music do you remember listening to, growing up in Edgewater Park?
I'm the 50s and 60s.
Go ahead. We'll
Yeah.
stick with you.
Yeah, I'm the fifth of 7 children. So my brothers and sisters, I was always listening to their 45s playing and stuff, and I got used to their music. And then the Beatles came in, the Rolling Stones, the Who, and all the other ones. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. The '60s had the best music. There's no, even my kids that were into punk and stuff like this
And grunge,
and
yeah.
stuff, and agree. There is nothing better than the '60s,
Yeah.
early '70s.
Yes.
I mean, look at Woodstock. I mean, you 500,000 people gathered together,
And nothing happened.
and nothing really happened and stuff. They helped one another and
Yeah.
stuff like this. Unfortunately, the Vietnam War took place and stuff like we lost members in the community or right outside the community, were killed in action over there and stuff. But the '60s was the best time. I grew up at the right time. That was my teenage years, and then '73 is when I got married. And I was only 21, and I bought my first house at 20. And I had a small bungalow, and then we had my one son, Kenny also, his name, and then we wanted to have more kids, and my father was selling his house, and I bought his because it was bigger, which to this day I'm still in that house, and I raised 3 boys, and all college educated, their wives all college educated, they all have great jobs and stuff like that. It's a good community. It was a community where you didn't even have to lock your doors.
No.
Truthfully, I had a neighbor behind me. He was a widower, and I heard him yelling, "Help! Help! Help!" So I go over to his house, and I opened up the storm door, and there was a little short hallway, and then the knob fell off his door, and he couldn't get out of his house. So I says, "Hold on." I says, let me go to the house. I got to get some. So I got a screwdriver, stuck it in, and a typical closet door. There was no locks.
No. Didn't need
He
them.
never had a lock on his door. Not a hasp, not a sliding bolt for nighttime. Nothing. He just had it I went home. I happened to have an old set in the basement. I put a lock system on for them and gave them the keys and stuff. I mean, that's how some of these houses are. When the houses were renovated, my wife's house, she grew up in Edgewater. When she was about 4 years old, she moved in, and we were renovating the house, tearing the walls down, and how they used to insulate the houses. They used to stick newspapers on the walls. To cover the drafts from the lapboard sidings. And in her house, it was 1926 New York Sun paper I had taken out of the walls of the house. And that wasn't unusual to see.
No.
It was always in the 20s, the newspaper that came out of the wall, because the people winterized. And I think the purpose for them doing that is the recession, the stock market crashed. And they had the two places, and I think they migrated up to the bungalows and said, let's live here year round and not pay for that apartment. It's cheaper to live up here.
The transition.
And they did, and they used space heaters. Usually the one room, the living room, had this big gas-fired space heater that warmed the rest of the house. And that's how they lived. That's how my wife's house was, definitely. And my sister's house to this day still has it that way in the one part of the house. I had radiators from God knows when in the thing.
So you married a community member.
Yeah, she was 4 years old when she moved in. I was 16 later on. We're both 70 now. And like I said, we brought up 3 great kids. I mean, it's really good. And it was a community you didn't worry about your kid, because if he screwed up and did something, the neighbor came and told you.
Yeah.
And then you got it. It's not like everything now to defend the kid. You know, there's some of these parents, they lost the values.
There's no discipline with the kids today. You could discipline, and your neighbor was allowed to discipline your own kid at the time, and would know, you know, if your kid got disciplined by your neighbor, kid would come home, he'd get disciplined by the parents.
I remember those days.
Yeah, you got smacked by who?
And if
now you got smacked by me.
Yeah.
You come home, the brother, I went to a Catholic school, you know, the brother hit me, oh, the brother hit you? Pow, I got hit. Because they didn't, you know, they weren't wrong. They were the authority.
And when my mother punished me, she would smack me and slap me upside the head. And then I go to bed, and my father came home, he woke me up, smacked me up again. Okay, now go back to bed. But you talk about dances that we had inside the firehouse. Kenny could elaborate more on the dance hall that Edgewater had at one time. It was a separate building. It was by
right
the front
of my house.
front of the house,
Yeah,
by the stores.
It was termite ridden, so they had to knock it down. And I think it was like the second year I moved there, and they had to tear it down. I'd never seen so many flying things cover the light by my house. You couldn't see the light. You could just barely see the light that night.
But they used to have
Stuff like
dances
that.
in there in the
Yeah,
40s and 50s.
you had a full basketball court. You had a stage. That's where they used to do the Labor Day ceremonies. They'd had doors all along the side. They'd open it up. You went in there. They had bingo for the firehouse. That's how the firehouse raised money. You had a bingo hall down there. And then there was a square club just as you came into Edgewater, and that was a Masonic lodge. That was right there. What else they have?
It was a quite active community, I have to say.
There was always something going on.
There's always something going on, and Edgewater's mentioned in quite a few books, just as a nice, quiet neighborhood where people tend to forget that it even exists. Partly because now it's actually bordered by parks, water, and a highway, essentially. So people still don't know. I remember going to IS 192 when it first opened up in '74, and they wouldn't give us bus passes because they thought we actually lived in a park because it was Edgewater Park, and they would not, because the word park to them meant green. I said no, it's the name of the community. So,
People would drive in looking for a park.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and realize there's all these houses and these little tiny streets, because all our fire trucks are mini versions of fire trucks. Because it's not that we couldn't afford a regular one, it was a necessity to get around the streets. When you actually come into the park, you dip down, and the reason for that is they built the Throggs Neck Bridge back in the 60s, and they pumped the sand in from Long Island. to bring the elevation up in the area. So we got people were calling it the swamp. Used to call it the swamp, but that whole area was swampland.
Weir Creek.
Yeah, Willard Creek ran all the way up into Castle Hill section, and that was cut off. And when you come into Edgewater and you're down along the waterfront, just on the left side where the community garden is now, it's high up, and that's all the leftover sand, which is pumped up there. So the Vietnam veterans from the Caroni Post said, I think it was 9 acres of land, and they petitioned the state to give them that. And now it's called the Bicentennial Veterans Memorial Park. And because all it was weeds and sand.
We used to call it the
Then
sand
it was
dunes.
developed, yeah, we used to call it the sand dunes when we were kids. We had a little baseball diamond up there that we made. It wasn't
Yeah.
anything official. Now it's got a diamond up there, and it's got walking things,
Yeah,
and they put in sod and everything, and they developed it, and it's a walking park and stuff like that. So yeah, it was nice, and that was only because the veterans fought for that land and got it, and they have ceremonies up there all the time.
Glenn, you mentioned something really interesting. You mentioned schools. Now, looking at the community geographically, where are your district schools? Elementary, middle, high school?
When I lived in the projects, we had PS 72 on Dewey Avenue had a little annex within the projects for the kindergarten classes, and then after kindergarten, went from first to third in PS 72, then was bussed over 73 to PS 71 for a year or two. And then when I hit middle school, I went to P. Argentini and Jones IS 192. It had just been built. And over the two slain officers that were killed, ambushed a couple of years earlier. And then I went from there, I went to Lehman High School, graduated there in 1980, and then went to Queensboro Community. And the thing with Queensboro Community is literally a 15-minute drive over the Throggs Neck Bridge from our community. But my dad wouldn't let me have the car, so I ended up taking 4 buses. It would take me 3 hours to get there. So needless to say, that trip only lasted about a year. But the community itself, schools-wise, there was nothing wrong with the school. Lehman High School had a rough beginning, a rough opening with the first principal. But when the new principal came in, when I started, he was able to get everybody, the students and the parents on board, and really turned it into a really good school until he retired. And now I think it's multiple schools inside one building, from what I heard.
Yeah, and it broke it up.
But IS 192 was a really good school because the only other middle school, aside from the Catholic schools, was 101, Henry J. Bruckner School.
And where was that located?
That was on Lafayette Avenue and the Cross Bronx. And my brothers and sisters went there. I was the first to go to P.R.G.T.D. Jones, and actually I was the first full-term graduate at a middle school, because you had served 3 years, but they had students who served only 2 in 1 year. But I was the first class to go to full 3 years in 1976 and graduated. So that was good. Still have my graduation beanie on at home somewhere.
Yeah, I went to 101 to the 9th grade. I already did 7 and 8 over at PS 80 off of junior high school 80 over Marshall Parkway. That's where and then when I graduated there, I had to go to Christopher Columbus High School over on Astor Avenue on the other side of Pelham Parkway, because we didn't have Lehman. They were building Lehman. The year they completed Lehman is the year I graduated Columbus High School. And then they opened, I think, 1971,
Yeah,
right?
71.
Yes. Lehman opened up 1971. I graduated 1970 because we had no high school in the area.
And even Throggs Neck at that time, in the early 70s, was pretty much still cut off from everybody. The main shopping was on East Tremont Avenue, from basically Miles Avenue up to Bruckner. But there wasn't a lot of stores. There were stores, but there wasn't a lot. You had bigger stores. You had Frank B's, which was a good store. I remember Knickerbocker Banquet Santa Claus. But but your overall community was still separated from the rest of the Bronx. Now it's all congested. Even up in Throggs Neck, it's congested. We lost some value. So we had German Stadium, which became Throggs Neck Country Club. We had Charlie's Inn, which was a great hangout for all the Irish. And Bronx Beach and Pool. I don't know when they closed, but I know going inside the building if there was declared demoed and looking at the old pinball machines as a kid. But the Edgewater itself was a great community. And even the Throggs Neck houses, when I grew up in it, was a great community. Everybody got along. There was no sense of racial bias. Everybody got along. It may seem segregated, but nobody picked on each other, especially at those times, the late 60s, early 70s, when racial riots were breaking out all over the place. You had all sides of people living in the projects at that time, and we all got along. Edgewater was just another step up. It was a great community. Great, like I said earlier, learning of values.
German and Irish.
Yeah, mostly German and Irish. And I tell you, if I had to trade anything, I wouldn't trade that in the world growing up. I really wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of wish I could time travel back to the beginning of Edgewater and live through it in each section just to know more about it, because the history of Edgewater is very hard to come by, especially with the firehouse. But do some research online, trying to get some of these old timers to talk. Unfortunately,
There's not many of them left.
not many of them left.
Yeah, I was just telling about one female. She's on the board forever, and she's got a lot of history. I mean, you just
Oral.
you talk, oral, and you give a house number, and she'll tell you who lived there in the 30s and stuff like that. She's amazing, great memory. I don't know how her memory is now. I was just telling Glenn, really, should try to sit down with her and just ask her questions and find out other things that I don't know and stuff like that. Funny thing is, when you go down the waterfront, basically by the community garden, which was originally the boatyard of Edgewater, and a bunch of the women got together and they started doing organic gardening out of bales of hay, and then they got it up and running. And now they for the small area that they got, the amount of food that comes out of that garden is unbelievable. And they take surplus and they'll give it to their neighbors, or what we have, it's called the Over 40 Club, which is probably late 70s and early 80s people. They go up, they have coffee, they have
Play bingo.
they have cake for them on Wednesdays. They meet up there and they'll bring the extra stuff up and let them take home whatever they raise from the garden. They just had the Lays Auxiliary of the firehouse just had the pumpkin picking, and they set the thing up and they decorated the whole thing, and it's really nice. And the kids came out. That was just last Saturday.
Kenny just brought up a memory of mine, the Over 40 Club bingo. So I would come home from school and I would take my dog out and just walk it around the firehouse. And in the firehouse, when they were playing bingo, we had the chalice windows, and then we would open it up because we didn't have air conditioning at the time. And I would have B52, and one lady would get up, I got bingo, and the other lady said, sit down, Murphy, you don't have nothing, just sit down and play the game. And then I hear the next number, and the lady who just told her to sit down, I got bingo, and they would bicker over who got bingo. It was hilarious just to hear their emotions on just playing bingo, and that was like their life. That was their afternoon, where they got out of the house. And,
I'll tell you, they're rootless.
Yeah,
they were
are
rootless. A woman had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Dropped onto the floor. The horn gets pulled. We respond. It's inside. We go inside. We're working on it, and they're yelling, "Pull numbers, pull numbers." Now, meanwhile, the cops come because they're dispatched on medicals at the time. The cop come, and the one cop says, "What is wrong with you people?" That's one of the funny stories.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, we have quite a bit of funny stories with the firehouse. Oh God, we had just purchased a 1979 GMC pumper, and we got delivered in mid-August and was put into service in September. And God rest his soul, Kenny Landia was the driver on this call. It was mid-October, and I was on the back step of the truck. So we responded to a car fire on the service road just outside Veterans Memorial Park. We would cover that area as well. And it was a car fire. It was a Mercedes, and I remember it to this day. But the car fire had started to light the pole on fire. So we decided to, Engine 72 came up. I was on the booster line for Edgewater. They had one of their guys on their booster. So we're knocking down the fire on the pole, and we start to turn our attention to the car. And I kid you not, Pastor, you could hear, we're hitting it, the fire from the back window in the trunk. You could hear the car flip its key, turn on, and drop itself in gear, and just roll. And we're standing, me and the guy from Engine 72, we're just looking at each other, and we're watching this flaming car just roll down to the next parked car. And Ken Landy is looking, he doesn't really see it. He says, "What's going on?" Because he's picking him out of the fire truck. He says, "Where's that car going?" I said, "We don't know. It just started up. It started rolling." And he looked at me. We looked at each other. It was 2 weeks from Halloween. And he says, "Okay." So we just trotted down. He moved the truck for us and just put out the car fire. But that was the strangest call I ever went on. And Kenny's not a big fan of scary stuff either in the fires, because I know for a fact that the firehouse itself is haunted. We've experienced that. There was another time Kenny and I would come up on a Friday nights to watch baseball, boxing, whatever it was, and we'd go into the bar area, and in the back of the firehouse meeting room, there's a card room, we called it, had heavy curtains on it, so you would know when somebody would open it up, you would hear it drag along the pole. So Kenny and I are in the firehouse, in the bar, and it's Friday night, and we hear the door open, the side meeting room door open. It has this distinct noise. You can hear it close. We hear the curtain open up, and we start to hear poker chips and cards being shuffled. So we're sitting here and say, "Ken, I'm not a card player, but for tonight I wanted to play cards." And Ken said, "Yeah, let's go play cards." So we leave the baseball game on. We go out, open up the door. The whole meeting room and the card room is dark. Not a soul in it. Kenny and I just looked at each other, decided that we're just going to go back to the bar, have another drink. I kid you not, it was loud as I'm talking to you now. That's how, and we know this place is haunted.
I'll use this segue just to announce that I probably didn't mention the date when we started this oral history. And it is October 26th of 2022, very close to
yes.
Halloween, so very fitting the story.
Yeah. So that was a definite thing, and like I said, Kenny's a little afraid, and I had a little fun with him. Another time, I hit one of our radios behind the TV, and knowing that Kenny was afraid, we went into the apparatus room, and I'm going like. Everybody were here, but we all played done. And Kenny go like, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" "He what? What are you talking about?" "Don't worry about it." He said, "I'm out of here." But yeah, the firehouse, like I said, it was a community-based organization. We only wish that we had more members. Fundraising is a hell of a job. It takes a lot of money to run the place. Being that we don't get the support from the community like we used to, because believe it or not, people don't even know that we exist. Even though they live within the park, it's a whole new genre of people, whole new culture.
How has it changed?
It got more diversified. It did get more diversified.
I think people, I'm paying my thing, leave me alone. I go to work. Come home, I watch my TV, shut off the lights, get up in the morning, go to work. Don't want to know nothing. It's like anywhere else.
Yeah,
people aren't volunteering and going. I remember, where could you go to a community where 25, 30 guys will show up to your house at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah.
We make a crew. Sometimes we'll get 2, 3, 4 guys. Sometimes you get more. They'll show up for the emergencies and stuff like that. Most of our calls are EMS, but we don't really have that many fires. We have first responders and EMTs. I said in the firehouse. In fact, our EMTs, we put them in the program, they graduate, they go on becoming EMTs for the city of New York, some private, then they take the next step and they become city firemen. You know, a lot of them became city firemen. We have retired chiefs from the city that live inside the park.
And you had mentioned, before it got diversified, you had mentioned the large groups, the German and Irish.
Yes,
Yes.
basically, yeah.
So sticking with that, what do you remember about food?
Food? Well, we had the deli
Oh my
was a
God.
German deli. It was called Brahren's. Brahren's. People would come from all over Throggs Neck just for that place. They
the best German potato salad you ever
yeah.
had. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a kept
It's
guarded secret.
It's
that
till this
thing.
day.
Yeah. One guy's got the recipe.
We call him Yogi Brown. His
Yeah.
real name is Volker, and he's only one left, and he has that recipe and will not share it.
Yeah, he
I
gave
tell
it to
you.
his brother-in-law when he opened up over in Silver Beach.
Oh, my God.
And that was it. I mean, my cousins were coming. My wife's cousins were coming down from Westchester just for the salads there. They sell fish cakes, rice pudding, tapioca,
All homemade.
chocolate puddings, the cold cuts, the freaking head cheese, and freaking monster, and cold cuts with all sorts of stuff in it, and stuff. But that's what the people
That's
grew
what
up
they
on.
did, yeah.
They grew up on those types of cold cuts and stuff like that. But it was a real pickle barrel.
Yeah.
And the pickle barrel,
The
the
bratwurst was
pretzel
the top.
rod
Oh,
stand
God.
was right next to the counter. You go and grab a couple of things, and what was no store could sell what the other store had. So they couldn't sell ice cream, soda, and stuff because the candy store and no candies and stuff they couldn't sell, and nobody could step on the other one.
And then you know what it
one
was?
thing.
It was a handshake agreement.
Yeah, yeah.
There was no papers, no lawyers involved.
Yeah,
If you had to compare it to something, you compare it to Mayberry.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. You had
it
the
was
stationery store. She sold cigars, cigarettes, magazines, newspapers. Nobody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody else could sell cigars
Exactly.
and cigarettes. The candy
And-
store
and
couldn't sell it. The
And the bakery,
The deli.
the bakery had the best black
Oh,
and white
Blueberry
cookies.
Bakery. He used to do catering.
Yeah.
To roll the banquet places. He'd do the dinner rolls. And I'll tell you something. I walked in there one day, and his name was Sal. I said, Sal, can you make me a 6-foot loaf of bread? And he says, yeah, I could get that into my oven. So I says, okay, because it was New Year's Eve was coming up. So he said, yeah, I can get it. So I think he charged me $5 for it. I take it, I go to the deli, I buy all sorts of cold cuts, and I make a 6-foot hero. First time a 6-foot hero ever was made. I'm telling you, to God's honest truth, I got photos of us all lined up like we're going to bite it at the party. So if people tell me, oh, you're crazy, crazy. I used to go into pizzerias, by my job and say, I made the 6-foot hero. Yeah, you're crazy. But how it got out is that Sal was doing the catering for the for what was at the time Tardy's. Now it's Villa Barone and stuff like that, Throggs Neck Stadium, and he started doing the things for them, and it became and then he started doing round ones with cold cuts and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure I was the originator. I think it was 1969, 1968 is when I had him bake that 6-foot loaf of bread.
He didn't get a patent on it, so
Yeah.
he lost out.
Yeah,
We have it here for posterity.
There we go.
yeah.
W- Keeping on that, so are there any restaurants or food spots in Edgewater Park currently?
No, we just had the deli.
Just
There's a
small
small
deli.
deli and stuff.
About as
It's
big
got
as
a
this
hot
room.
table. Not much stuff there. It's more of a jeez, I need milk.
Yeah.
Or you come over, let me run over and get a 6-pack of beer.
It's our version of 7-Eleven.
You're hungry? Yeah, let me
Yes.
go get your sandwich there. And they make up the sandwich and stuff. Nothing like the German deli that was
no.
there. Nothing.
No.
And that all burnt down in '79.
That was a big hit for the community.
That was a killer. It was. They tried. They wound up getting trailers, and they set
the
up
hope-
trailers. And the stationery came back, the candy store came back, the real estate came back,
In the hopes
and
that
the
they
deli
will one
came
day
back.
rebuild.
And thought they were going to rebuild, but it never happened. It's just a giant parking lot now.
So
yeah.
delivery has to be obviously go through the gate.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think this is a great point where we can switch up and go directly to the Edgewater Park Voluntary Hose Company #1, which is the last of its kind in the Bronx and one of the few remaining citywide, which I learned
Right, 9 left.
at your event, your 100th anniversary event. So can you, Glenn, can you talk about a little about the need for the fire department and why there's a volunteer fire department there?
Well, the need for it stemmed from the early campers that started to stay there year round. Actually, the fire department, from what I understand, actually was only in service from late spring to Labor Day, and when everybody would go back into the city, it would essentially close down for the winter season. But as people started to spend all year round, it was determined that one of our founding members, Herman O'Neill, had decided we need to have a volunteer, we need to have a fire department year round, and that's how the firehouse became in 1922. We believe, doing some research, that it started off as the Edgewater Chemical Hose Company, ceased operation that same year, and later on became Edgewater Camp Volunteer Hose Company. The difference in the naming, for whatever reason, we're still trying to research on that, and so that became the need. But as Edgewater Camp grew, the streets didn't really grow. It was more still horse and carriage. There was very little cars at the time, so there was no need for it. So they kept the streets small and simple. And I believe as the 30s and 40s and the 50s came, the outside of Edgewater became the streets more citywide. You got to remember, the firehouse still exists today only because the streets cannot handle New York City Fire Department vehicles, and that's why it's important that we exist, because there are many times when we have gotten structure fires that the city has commented, if it wasn't for us, all of Edgewater have probably burned down, or a good portion of it, because we live on site, we respond within seconds, not minutes, of the alarm going up. We know where the hydrants are, because the fire hydrants are actually hidden in alleys, and the city guys don't know where they are. Our guys do. We live there. This is our community, and that's basically why it still exists. And people, today don't realize that without us, a lot of changes would have to come in order for the city to help service us in a fire fighting situation. And that's where we get frustrated as members, that, yeah, we volunteer, we signed up for this, but it also gets frustrating that we're the only ones at this point. We got 20 members, and it's the same guys all of the time. The neighbors right now don't want to get involved as much as they used to back in the day, and I'm going from the 20s on right on up through the 70s and early 80s, and that's how involved the fire department was.
We had to put a limit on buffs at time. I think we allowed 10 at a time. We had wait lists for guys to come in and have to wait either somebody quit or somebody moved up to fireman. We could bring another one in because such a demand.
Yeah, I actually,
It's
when
tough.
I was a mascot and ready to transition into a buff, I couldn't right away. I had to wait for a member to graduate from a buff into a member before I became a buff. That's how much of a importance and a lot of members that we had at that point. So,
And we'd have about 70, 75 members twice a month. It was Thursday, the second and fourth Thursday of the month. And
Meetings.
we'd have 70, 75 guys show up for a meeting night and stuff like that. And they put out a hot meal, roast beef, mashed potatoes, some kind of a vegetable. Sometimes it would be roast pork and stuff like that. You always got a hot meal twice a month going up to the meetings. Now you have a meeting, maybe
4 or 5 guys show up.
yeah, sometimes 4 or 5 guys will show up, maybe 10 if something's going on, 15, you know.
It's very hard to replace our generation, Kenny and I's generation. I mean, there are some younger guys in their 30s or 40s that are trying to keep it stabilized, and as older members, we're trying to help them, knowledgeable wise, but we don't. I don't fight the fires anymore.
Yeah, 9/11 took a toll on me down there. We responded. There was about 15 of us, went down to 9/11. We went down after the second tower came down. The time we got down, the papers were still flying around. The pulverized concrete debris was like maybe 2-3 inches thick, powdery. I'd never seen so many high heels in the streets leading to the ferries. It was incredible. At that time, I didn't have phone, pictures, cameras and stuff there. We didn't carry cameras with us and stuff. That was an incredible day. And the reason a lot of the firemen died, I believe, is they caught them into shifts. So instead of going out with a 5-man crew, they went out with 7 to 8 guys on a truck. One of my friends was hazmat, brilliant guy, Philip McGall Sr. And his company, I think 21 went down, 17 died in his house. We found him later on. He was just gray. We washed his face off just to get him. I said, what do you want to do? I want to go back to my house. It's all right. Jump in the truck. I was driving that day. And O'Brien was with me. He was my partner down there. We drove all the way back over to Queens. We get to the apparatus room floor. All you seen was the shoes kicked off. We stripped them on the apparatus room floor. Went upstairs to the chief's office. Guy hands him a clipboard. Says, who? Just pushed the clipboard and said, they're all dead. Then he's answering the phone, and
Wives and girlfriends.
the wives are calling up. And he's telling them, we just got separated. It's all right. And he's going, they're dead. You hang up the phone. He goes, they're dead. They're dead. I said, I walk down the hallway. I go to the kitchen, and pie plates with pies cut out, and dishes laying there, and coffee cups that the guys were having, and never came back. And that took a toll on me. That was terrible. That day.
And going back to the 15 members that went down from our group, we had other members that stayed back and had to actually cover NYFD's surrounding neighborhood.
Yeah, we covered Throggs Neck.
We covered Throggs Neck, so we had a double crew. And unfortunately, and Kenny could correct me if I'm wrong, all 15 guys that went down have suffered from something from 9/11. Kenny himself, Phil McGardle, beat cancer 3 times. One member was extremely...
Brendan O'Brien.
Yeah. Everybody suffered something. We may have had one person or 2 people have died from 9/11, but the rest...
Johnny.
The rest of are all suffering.
Johnny
Kenny's
went
suffering.
slow.
And to bring that point across, and I'm stepping away from the history of the firehouse to 9/11. I don't like talking about 9/11. I was in the city that day. I was managing 2 buildings, and 2 things that happened that day. Actually, 3 things happened that day. I felt the earth move when the first building came down because I was walking the street and I felt the rumble, and I said to myself, one of the buildings came down, and sure enough, I heard later on it registered 3.1 on the Richter scale. So I knew right away that the building was gone. Number 2, I finally was able to take a PAD train into Newark Penn Station, and I ran into some gentlemen from Newark, 5 African American men, and all came to me while I was waiting for my in-laws to pick me up, who lived in the next town in Bloomfield. And they had wanted to know what was going on. How was it like in New York City? Is it as bad as they say it is? I said, it's worse. I said, everybody's walking around like a zombie. Nobody knows where. It's eerily quiet. And the one gentleman said to me, and I'll never forget it, and I wrote it down, and I've written to radio stations and newspapers about this and made the story. The gentleman said to me, we have our problems. And I asked him, well, what do you mean? Black and white people. In this country, we have our problems. But when somebody attacks family, and he used the word family, even though we had our differences, when somebody attacks family, meaning the United States, he says, we put the differences aside like family do and take care of business. And I said to him, you know something? You're absolutely right. And with that, that's when I wished him good luck because my in-laws that came up. And when I finally got home, my wife, my baby daughter, she had just turned 6 months at the time. My wife said that people were out in the street clapping that I made it home. I can't recall that. I guess I was still numb for it. And what made it even worse was I parked at a parking lot in Clifton, which is the next town over, to catch the bus and pick up my car. And there was about a dozen vehicles that were roped off, people who were not coming home. And that is why that motion, that's why I do not talk about 9/11, because I looked at it differently than Kenny when he was down at the scene itself. So that's why I don't talk about it. Moving fast forward to this year was really the first time I started to get involved with a little bit of 9/11 stuff. Shelley Sunstein from AXQ Q104.3 rock station. She very involved in the 9/11 community and helping survivors getting the medical treatment and funding that they need to help. And I realized that she's been doing it for about 12 years now, and she would honor those. She said, we just lost another member of the Braves FDNY or NYPD or EMS. And then I realized, hey, wait a minute. I just got back involved with Edgewater's Firehouse, and we had 15 members down there, and they were all sick. If not, one of them had just died. And I wrote an email to Shelley. She had no clue that New York City had volunteer fire departments, including our own, and that we all responded, all 9, 10 units, departments at the time.
10 at the time, yeah.
10 at the time, all responded. And she had no clue, and we ended up doing a video interview with her, which I'll gladly share the link with you when I get back, so you can listen to myself and Deputy Chief Joe Ranieri did the interview on behalf of the city volunteers, specifically for us as well. But she had no clue, and they offered us help, and we're getting continuous help. But by that interview, strangely it may seem, since we have a lot of classic rock listeners in Edgewater, we got 4 new members out of that. So, but I'll be gladly, I'll share the link with you, I'll send it over to you. But that's my extent of 9/11, and I don't like to talk about it. But the firehouse is really involved in this community. Our charter states that we can and will respond to calls outside of our jurisdiction if needed. And there were many times that we were. We actually responded to accident calls on the Throggs Neck Bridge when the city fire departments or ambulances were not available. So we got the call from FDNY dispatch. But here's the kicker: why Edgewater still exists. The city, when it took over all of the departments back in the late 1800s, started absorbing. Realized they could not absorb everything because their vehicles were much bigger. So when they took over all the volunteer departments, they did not recognize the ones who were left over. So they were basically left on their own to fend for themselves, fundraise for themselves, train themselves. And that's why
Except for Staten Island.
Yeah, they were
Richmond and
subsidized.
Oceanic, they're subsidized by the city.
So
Staten Island.
So as New York City became bigger in population, whatever fire departments, volunteer fire departments were left was just absorbed by FDNY and the city. To this day, the city of New York officially does not recognize the 9 volunteer fire departments that are left in the city. Locally, our FDNY brothers up Engine 72, Ladder 80, Engine 89 and 50, and Battalion 20 help us because they're the ones that back us up locally, and they'll help us supply us the hoses and equipment from time to time, help us get some training at the training island. But officially, the city does not recognize it. New York State does. They can't
because their union is so powerful. We were trying to get other fire departments, volunteer fire departments, and paid departments are subsidized by the insurance companies. They get a percentage of the policies that are written. And We had it all the way up to Albany when Carrie was in, and because we had somebody through our association, the New York City Volunteer Firemen's Association, had Carrie's man's band, and he was talking to the governing out these guys and stuff, trying to get somebody insurance money. This New York City Fire Department lobbyists are so powerful. It never got on the floor. It was wiped out. We almost had it. We almost got subsidized by the insurance companies.
And as a matter of fact, in 1974 or 75, when the only time that I can recall that the FDNY went on strike, their firemen, not the local fire houses, but other firemen from different parts of the city, came in and blocked our doors for us to respond. Even though we were private property, they tried blocking our doors.
They did.
And they did.
They put vehicles against doors,
So
station wagon.
Yep, we couldn't respond in case of an emergency. So you want to call it bad apples? We call it bad apples at that time. But one of our members said it great. It says, let them block us, and then we'll see what happens in the firehouse. To the firehouse, and if a fire went up in Edgewater, let's see how big of a lawsuit that New York City would face at that time. And that's essentially what drove them out.
And they were drinking too.
Yeah, they were drinking too, but still in all, you don't block a volunteer firehouse who basically they didn't respond to us. They backed us up and we gave them the line, but they had no right to block us up. We were a private community. They had Throggs Neck and Helen Bay at the time, but there was no reason to block us up. And that was the only time there was bad blood per se. Like I said, like Kenny said, New York City can't recognize us, but the local houses do. We get compliments after compliments, especially when we have a structural fire. They will compliment us, say, "Hey, listen, again, if it wasn't for you guys, it'd be a lot worse."
Yeah, it was,
And even when we responded to the store fires, even though it went to 3 alarms, it could have went to 5 alarms easily if we weren't there first.
yeah, we just had 2 years ago, Thanksgiving, Friday after Thanksgiving, a house guy was using electric heaters. He was an unstable person. His house caught up, jumped to the second house. Because we got down there, our truck could get down there. We got in tight. We had lines on the fire. The city took a long time to get a line in to the house. And the chief said, if it wasn't for you, there would have been more houses would have went. And we got a compliment. And that's not the first time. We've had a couple of good fires we got come. Because we're right on the water. We're on a peninsula. And you get a slight window off the water blowing in shore. It could really take out a lot of houses. Breezy Point and just Point, they wiped out their community.
Yeah,
That was
Sandy.
destroyed all those houses out in Queens. We actually lent them one of our pumpers and a generator out there until they got back on their feet. And we had a clothes drive in the community and sent old clothes and stuff like that out there to Breezy Point.
And the fact of the matter is that even though it may sound come off negative that New York City doesn't recognizes us because legally they can't, maybe, it's not to say that the politicians don't recognize us, because they do.
Yeah.
And we also got visited by 3-4 mayors. I remember at Koch, we had Giuliani, we had Bloomberg, all come in, and they were on campaign. They were invited.
Wagner.
Yeah, they were invited to come and speak at a Memorial Day parade and ceremony that we had, or they would come in to help fundraise. They weren't there for political. They were there to help us. And
Yeah, we got surprised one Memorial Day. The 2 politicians at the time was, oh God,
Andrew
took over Calantro.
Kaufman,
Who?
Steve Kaufman.
Well, Kaufman and one was a state senator, one was a state assemblyman. They were mingling up because we have a memorial stone down at the thing. That's where we would assemble on Memorial Day. And they're talking, and then one says to the other, one says, I just talked to Steve Kaufman. We're both going to give $50,000 to the firehouse to buy a new fire truck. That was amazing. I mean, that was made up right then and there.
Yeah.
The city does pick up our compensation insurance, picks it up for all the volunteers. They do give a little thing. It's got to be voted on all the time at the city council every year. So it's a hit and a miss, the thing.
It really, in essence, and I'm going to broaden this out a little bit, and I'm going to say Edgewater residents don't know this, that 70% of the firefighters in the United States are volunteers.
Yeah.
So there's only 30% that are paid. Yeah, you go to the metropolis, you'll see 15,000 FDNY employees. But you got to remember, that's a small percentage of what's actually saving your property, saving your lives.
Long Island is basically, Nassau and Suffolk is basically volunteers. They have what they call paid drivers. They'll get the thing to the thing, and the guys to the scene, and the volleys carry their equipment in their cars in some places, and they'll go to the scene of the fire, get dressed at the fire, and then take the line. Some of them will have 2 maybe paid members, a driver and thing. They'll get the pump running, set it up, stretch a line, and fight the fire with nobody at the pump. That's right. It's
Get it set up?
yeah, it's a big thing. You go into rural communities, it's all volunteers. Even the ambulances services, it's volunteers. You got to get a decent sized city, decent sized town to have the municipality. Cops were always paid, but ambulance service, and sometimes you have to worry about another township to get an ambulance in, and then what they call mutual aids. Other fire trucks will come from all different other communities to fight fires. Westchester's big on that. They'll bring a fire company. That's why you see that the fire trucks may have engine 38072 and stuff like that. It's Westchester. Then you go up to Putnam, the same thing. Everybody has a mutual aid, they call it.
Does the volunteer host company have joint drills with outside fire departments?
We used to have it. We even had drills with the Coast Guard, with the
helicopter, yeah.
with the helicopter
And
coming
the
down,
Zodiac.
taking things. The Zodiac, we had a Zodiac at the time. That's a inflatable boat. Well, it's permanently inflated, and thing with a small motor off the thing, just because we're a nautical community and stuff like that. When that house that I had talked previous about, the Thanksgiving a couple of years ago, the chief that's up there now, the Italian chief, there's a headquarters in part of Engine 72. They were also the satellite unit for the super pumper, which I don't even think it's in service. Never hear it anymore about it. But yeah, they call in fireboats in Edgewater, and they'll call in what they call maybe 3-2. They'll send 3 pumpers and two ladders in if they hear it's a fire automatically now. No, none. Used to get 1 and 1 or 2-1, 2 pumpers and a thing. Now we get them further away and they come. And the new thing is they'll dispatch a fireboat to bring it in, just so they can put it like they did the World Trade Center. We were hooking up hoses for the fireboat to hook up to the city engines that were totally useless because there was nothing there to fight. By that time, everything was shot.
And I think the thing that's unfortunate, and I believe our charter states to be a member of our department, you have to live or work within the park. And unfortunately, since we have a website up, we have gotten 2 applications from people who lived in Throggs Neck but can't become members. And my guess is why they can't be, because they can't travel in their personalized vehicle with any type of lighting to come and help in Edgewater. Because I believe, and I'm not 100% sure, again, it's illegal other than FDNY or NYPD personnel to be driving other than official vehicles It's not like in Long Island where you drive your personal vehicles, but they can't be driving and speeding into Edgewater. Let's say from German Stadium or Country Club. They can't respond, even though they have a radio. They can't respond as a active person. So that's why we're kind of limited to our charter is limited to how we can have members join. So you have to be within the confines of Edgewater.
You can have a blue light on the dashboard, and it can only be so bright, and you have to stay within the speed limits of what's posted, and you're not allowed to jump red lights unless a cop sees you and lets you go by and stuff. That's what the rules were basically set up for. Yeah, we own the blue lights, us and volunteer ambulance corps.
Just to take a little shift on the voluntary hose company itself, the George A.D. Mansion, which is home to the firehouse. Can you speak, Kenneth, about the history between acquiring the George A.D. Mansion and how it became the firehouse itself?
I'm not sure, but I think it's because after the 80s left the area, and they weren't really there that long. They were there from
48 to
it was around
Oh, it was later. Yes,
by the
yes.
Civil War.
That's right.
I think 1864, 65.
Right.
They took over, and then they were gone by the 80s.
Yes.
They had moved down to Manhattan. The son became a lawyer. I forgot what the daughter's name. I have the maid and the cook's name. I had it somewhere. And then the Shores came along, and Richard Shore Sr., he had the three sons, and I think they rented the land from the 80s before they bought it. And then they wound up buying it, I think around 1910 or so. It's vague. I mean, I tried reaching out to the family that's alive and really no help. But we've seen photos and stuff like that from different events and stuff. And because we're trying to find out when it was called, Edgewater Camp. We found out 80's wife, what the heck's her name? She was the one that gave it the name Edgewater. And she came from Connecticut. The one son, George, he went to Yale University. And to this day, the boathouse is named after him. And he was a tennis athlete and a football athlete. And he has a football card. I've seen it. Yeah, it's amazing. But he was a Yale graduate, and he went into law. But they moved down to Manhattan, and and then I guess they won the life. This was too rural for them. And then Richard Shore was an immigrant from Ireland, and he had the sons, which was Richard Shore Jr., Robert Shore, and James Shore. And then they started renting the land. They belonged to a church, St. Anne's, down around St. Anne's Avenue in the Bronx. And they let the cadets, they called them at that time, they looked like Boy Scouts. They had the high socks, the knicker pants, the round Smokey Bear hats, the ties. And they let them bivouac, meaning pitch tents on the property. And the kids enjoyed it in the summertime. They were up here and boom, boom, boom. And then the kids went back and told their parents, Mom, Dad, this place is beautiful. We can swim, the water's right there. You can fish. There's apple trees, orchards, and stuff like that. And the parents started asking them, could we pitch a tent? And that's where this came up. They wrote up an agreement, and it's a rental agreement, and you can see it says Westchester County on the thing, Westchester.
Right.
Because the Bronx wasn't there in 1898 is when the Bronx bought it. The city of New York bought it from Westchester County. So it shows you how far back this has gone, which is really interesting. Another interesting point is that I was talking to this younger man, Bobby Brown. He was down on one of the beaches, and he was scanning with a metal detector. And I said to him, find anything interested? And he reached into the bag and he showed me some stuff he put, and it was a badge from St. Anne's Church from 1897, buried in the sand. And I said to him, "How much you want for that?" And he said, "I don't want anything." So I says, "I'll tell you what, I got a copy of this map." I says, "From the area, I'll give you that for that thing." And we traded, and I forgot to bring it. And it showed that the cadets were there. That story about them bivouacking on the property, this was buried in the sand, about a foot down.
Wow.
Yeah, it was interesting. It took me hard to get. I had to get a really powerful magnifying glass to read the instructions. Yeah, it looks like it's made out of bronze.
We're still trying to find out how exactly. I mean, we kind of generally know how the firehouse started because it started to turn into a year-round encampment. But we want to know exactly what it was called before, and how Edgewater, how Mr. Short became, started to, the stories behind him leasing out the land for $7 a month. Be a camp, a luxury camp at that moment, and exactly what year did he actually start that? Because obviously, there's got to be some additional information out there. We just got to poke our nose into it and do some more research, and that's where I come. and I'm really into this. And one of the other questions I want to talk to you later is that what about our chief? Notice in the book has a list of Bronx volunteer fire departments of all time, and Edgewater is listed, aviation, and before aviation it was Higgs Fire Department, Silver Beach, but in it it mentions Westchester, which the Bronx was part of, but it has the same street address as ours. So we're thinking before 1922 and in the late 1800s, before New York City annexed the Bronx, part of Westchester, we had another fire department. So we just learned that just the other day, so I'm going to try to do some research, and hopefully you can help me out, get with a contact from Westchester Historical Society, because they have more of information on the mansion itself and the firehouse.
That's his chewing gum tobacco card
That's
from
amazing.
Yale University. Yeah, this is the son of George Townsend 80. He was born on July 4th, 1874. And like I said, the boathouse is still named after him to this day. Another interesting fact behind the firehouse, before all those houses were added, my house was 135B. The next house was 236B. So it was weird. I find out that it was tennis courts back there. And Brooke Shields' grandfather was the tennis pro on the property. So it was active with tennis up there. And it goes across three roads of three streets of houses where the numbers are crazy. They jump into the 200s all of a sudden. All because there was tennis courts behind the firehouse.
And there were clay tennis courts, and the only reason why I know there were clay tennis courts because my house on a heavy rain would flood in the basement, and I'm gonna have to bail it out. And that's why we figured it out. It was a clay tennis court because clay doesn't retain water, it just comes right up.
Yep. And there's a stream running in
Yeah,
there
and there's
somewhere.
a stream there too.
Fresh water. That's why they built the house, because they must have had the fresh water
Right.
runs through the property. I was trying to find the one thing with the family, the warm correspondence I had gotten from them. I seen it the other day, where they told me when the Shores moved into the mansion.
I think it was I want to say 1890s.
No, it was a real short period of time. Yeah, 80s, 11 rooms, 1860.
Irishman named Richard Shore.
Oh yeah, okay. That's Richard
And it's
Shore.
St. Anne's Cadets.
Yeah, all right, bivouacked. All right, yeah. Yeah, this is
Yeah, the Shores moved in.
tells when the
1910.
Shores, the 80s moved out and the Shores moved in.
And you can see the parapets.
Yes.
Yeah. And what other interesting was, as the campers came up to the thing, and The Shores moved across the street. The three houses still exist.
Okay.
Or they did. Richard Shaw had passed away, senior. We have plaques outside the firehouse commemorating different things. The houses still exist. So the building was just sitting there. So they turned it into a general store, kind of. And I think there was separate people running things. One side, in front of the firehouse, was an ice cream parlor. On the inside, there was a grocery store. And then there was a bakery that still, you could see it blocked up in the cellar of the one part of the firehouse. It's a cellar that's shut off from all the other part of the firehouse, from the main cellar. And it's bricked over, and you can see where there was an oven at one time down there. So that became the general store. Now, where the apparatus room bays are, we have two bays. The one all the way to the left, and there's an entrance door to go into what we call the tower, the square part of the building. It's blocked up. It was a door there. There's a telephone in there. And it was like the only telephone in Edgewater. And when people wanted to reach a camper, they'd ring the phone, and I'm told kids would sit on the steps there during the day and wait for the phone to ring. Get it, find out what we're looking for, and the kids would run down and tell them you got a telephone call. And I don't know how long this thing took. I'm sure it was costing money holding the line open. And the kids would probably get a nickel or a few pennies, and then they run down to the candy store. And I was told that was a boot. That was the thing built into the mansion.
And this question, I pose it to either you, Glenn, or Ken. You guys were mentioning about Robert Moses, the famous Robert Moses here in New York City. And Edgewater Park's community fight with him.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate?
Yeah, what happened was he wanted a waterfront drive around from the South Bronx all the way up to Pelham Bay Park. And that would entail taking, I don't know how many feet of footage, but I think it was at least 2 streets of Edgewater. People would lose their homes.
On the waterfront.
And he would, on the waterfront. So this is what he wanted. Well, we went to court. And what I was told by Mrs. Morstadt, 2 busloads of Edgewater residents went down. Silver Beach, nobody showed up. And they had the same, it would have been the same thing for them, their waterfront property. But Edgewater fought him. And it was the first time he was ever defeated on one of his projects. Because he built the bridges, he built parks, he built Jones's Beach. He did a lot of building, but he wanted to grab our area and throw out all these people, which would entail probably 100 houses would have had to leave the...
And with that said, Robert Moses and his plans...
Yeah, and he was powerful.
The plans he executed displaced lots of New Yorkers.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I think the Cross Bronx too, right? That was his project there.
Right into the Throggs Neck Bridge.
Yeah.
And that was part of the local, because now it was going to go through Edgewater, but it was going to head up towards Pelham Bay. And
It was going to be called Shore Drive.
Yeah.
But not spelled the same way, S-H-O-R-E, where S-H-R-W, yeah. The Shores, just so happened, and that's what it was going to be called. It still shows on city maps. City maps of Edgewater, you look at it, and there's streets that come through. It says Spring Street. They don't exist. It's what the city was going to call them and stuff like this. Or if Edgewater ever went out, they already had streets named.
Yeah.
There's a short block right outside Edgewater, right out the gate. It's called Washington Avenue. It exists for like 150, 200 feet. That's it.
Yeah.
And Washington Avenue is all the way down, because I lived on Park Avenue, and Washington was the next block up. And it's crazy. Even where my son had a bar, it was famous, called Alfie's. It was 50 years, but with this virus and the epidemic went, it closed down. In front of his thing is 177th Street. The only 177th Street. It's one short block outside of PS 72.
Maybe 200
And then
feet.
it goes all the way down the Cross Bronx Expressway.
Right.
And then you pick up 177th, where I lived on Park Avenue. That's where I lived, 177th to Park Avenue.
But
It's great, these short blocks.
Robert Moses he normally got his way.
Yes.
And with
Yes.
Edgewater put up a fight. I'll send you a copy of the report which I just unearthed from another website. It details what the press, how it covered it, and how upset Moses was that he didn't get his way. He was really, that was probably right after he helped finance and built the Verrazano Bridge. That was probably the end of his legacy right there.
Yeah,
So,
and Jones's Beach, he made sure the overpasses that were going out to Jones's Beach were so low, buses couldn't go out there.
that was purposely done.
That was racially done. Jones's Beach.
Wow.
Yeah.
The low overpasses, so buses couldn't get out there.
Public transportation couldn't
Couldn't
the
go
general
out there.
public
You
out
can
there.
only get out there by car.
And New Yorkers generally don't have cars.
No,
Right.
not at that time. No.
Right? Exactly.
Wow, I mean, this has been such an informative and I would say revelating, oral history in Edgewater Park. Not very well-known community, New York City, resident-wise, and I'm glad I had this opportunity, and I'm glad you two, were able to find, time in your calendars aside from your busy schedules. And before we conclude, was there anything, Glenn, Kenneth, that you want to add?
Well, a couple of things. We had a bad snowstorm back in the 70s. Maybe 74, 70. Anyway, the cars were bogged down on the Throggs Neck Bridge. They couldn't move. It came in so fast, so heavy. It stopped. The Bridge and Tunnel Authority, Triborough Bridge cops told them, walk over that way. There's a firehouse up there. We put up so many people. Community people went home, got chickens that they had. We had big industrial pots and the thing. We threw the chickens in there. We made soup. They had their pets with them, some of them. People went home and got dog food and stuff, etc. We got letters from these people saying, I always hear the bad raps about the Bronx. I never knew this place existed. These people are so wonderful. And we had them on the walls for years, pinned up there, these people thanking us.
Yeah.
And saying they never knew that there was people like this out there.
Wow.
Yeah, that really brought the morale up at a firehouse.
It did.
And, yeah, because it is an evacuation center. We have a half a mile of waterfront where we live. And a nor'easter is very destructive to us. We took the no-name storm that happened in December.
91.
Was it 91?
91.
91. And that hit us. It took out about 5 houses. And that nobody'd seen that thing coming. Nobody'd seen that storm coming. And the firehouse, we had people up for about a week.
Yeah.
Right there. We finally had to tell them you had to find other. There's like maybe 1 or 2 left. Find something else to move into. But we were an evacuation center, and many a time the Red Cross brought up a ton of cots. And the thing and the treat. I can't eat them to this day. Those energy bars.
Oh,
Cases
before they were energy bars, they were Red Cross energy bars. Who ever heard of an energy bar back then at that time?
Oh God, man.
But the thing about Edgewater, like the gentleman I spoke to in Newark, in Newark regarding 9/11, Edgewater is a community
Unique.
that is very unique. Will help itself when it needs to.
Come together.
But here's the catch. When we need to have members come up because of the change in direction of society itself, the word volunteer is not in the mix anymore, unfortunately. People don't understand. They only want to hear what they want to believe. They believe too much of social media instead of getting out there and finding for themselves what's out there in their own backyard. And in this case, the new generation of people who live in Edgewater. When I was growing up, and even when Kenny was growing up, you moved there, you raised your kids there, your kids ended up moving in and staying inside the park.
They flip over. They usually pick up their grandparents' houses.
Exactly. And now the generation that's coming in, they're only in here for a few years and then time to move out. So
Stepping stone house, we used to call
Yeah.
it. It was a launching pad.
Right.
You moved in, you saved up, you moved on.
because it is
Some stayed, I stayed.
because as one article in the newspaper mentioned years ago, where else are you going to find $1 million view for a quarter of a million price? $250,000 on average for the price of a home in Edgewater. You got a beautiful view, you got a beautiful community. Needs maintenance just like any other community, but the problem is it's private, and then that's work for you. It can work against you. Yes, we do get city services, but it's limited. It's limited because as a community you can't afford it. So the people that are living in Edgewater are living it because they can afford to. But the problem is, you can't go above and beyond and ask the city for additional services without compensating them. Going back to the fire department, their rigs are only getting bigger and bigger, but our streets are not. Our streets are getting smaller and smaller because we have more people with more cars. Back when Kenny and I grew up, one family had one car, maybe
Right.
two. Now you have their kids who have 3 or 4 kids. They each have cars. So where do you park? You park anywhere they want to. And that's another issue that the firehouse deals with. They park where they want to. They double park. They block the fire hydrants. And it's time and time again we remind them, hey, you could be the possible problem of a future disaster. As you saw when you saw in Edgewater, how tight the streets are. You know, if you wanted to borrow milk or sugar from your neighbor, all you got to do is stick out your hand out the window and you can reach into your neighbor's kitchen. You know, that's how tight the streets are.
We're so close to houses. I used to say, if you sneeze, your neighbor would yell, "God bless you." This is no lie.
No.
Just this summer, I'm in the bathroom and I sneezed, and my neighbor behind me, she just happened to be out because there's no house behind me. It's very rare not having a house behind you. A road. I have a road on both sides of my house. Usually it's a house, an alleyway, a house. And I sneezed, and she's cute. My neighbor, she yells, "God bless you." And I started laughing. I'm saying, all these years I lived there, 30, 40, 50 years, I always said this as a joke. And I said it just
Finally
happened.
That is a great story.
Yeah, because the houses are only maybe 8 feet apart, some of them.
Right.
You know,
If you're lucky.
it's really, really tight, especially the waterfront's tight.
Running low on battery here, so I want to conclude. Glenn, what does the Bronx mean to you?
Bronx as a whole means family. It means coming of age, growing up, proud. Always be a Bronx boy, even though I'm a Jersey guy now. As my wife would tell you, said keep the Bronx in the Bronx. I said no, the Bronx will always be with me, no matter what. And I cherish it. And from my point of view, I wouldn't change anything that happened to me growing up in the Bronx.
Awesome. Ken?
Yeah, no, same what Glenn said. It was a life experience. I learned a lot. I lived in the streets. I grew up in the streets. Not that I lived in there, but I grew up. I'm street smart. Helped you survive. My education was parochial up until the 5th, 6th grade, and then I went into the public school system and stuff like that. I got an education because I wanted the education.
Exactly.
I paid attention. I wasn't a brain, but I absorbed. I was I have to do this for 12 years. Let's get it over with, and stuff like that. I had good teachers that were willing to teach and stuff like that, and it was a great experience. And Edgewater as a whole, fantastic place to grow up. It's safe. When my kids grew up, you didn't have to worry about them. They can go out for the whole day. I know they were in the park somewhere, and someone was looking. We have a half a mile of waterfront. We have beaches all around the area. Not the greatest of beaches, but good beaches. And we never had a kid drowned. We had a couple of incidents, maybe cut feet, stuff like that on the beach. But nobody ever drowned because there was always an adult somewhere. And earlier in the thing, we had a lifeguard service, which I didn't know about up until maybe 10, 12 years ago. I didn't know we had a lifeguard service. And at a couple of the main beaches, they actually had stands where people volunteered to sit up there. and watch the bathers. But like I said, everybody swims. Everybody except my sister, my one sister. I go to throw her in the pool one time. We were on vacation down in Florida, and she hugged me like an octopus. And I'm saying, "What's the matter with you, Ann?" And she says, "I can't swim." And I walk with her over to my mother and says, "How come Ann can't swim?" Because my mother was a great swimmer.
That's one thing about Edgewater. You learn to be an athlete, not a great athlete, but you learn to be great, an athlete with the Labor Day games, with swimming in the spring and the summer, and you got to help your neighbors too. That's the beauty of
That's
Edgewater.
one thing. Yeah, you're doing something on your house, a guy would stop by. You know, it's a little crooked there, and then the next thing he's on the ladder.
Yeah, he's on the ladder
doing stuff like that. When I bought my first house, I had a painting party. I got a keg of beer, got my friends, and got the things of painting. And it was Edgewater was either your house was gray or it was Bond red. Harvard's gold. I painted stairs and robots, one coat painting. Invited my friends over, sandwiches, beer, and everybody, and painted my house that day.
Still, the color still exists on that house, right?
Does it? I don't know.
I think it does. Well, until vinyl siding became more popular.
Yeah, and then I had a painting party. My friends came over and painted the outside of my house.
How many houses did we paint in Edgewater?
Yeah, we painted a lot of houses.
Kenny would hire me as a helper, and we painted numerous houses.
2 beers and get you.
With self one before lunch.
We didn't drink when we were doing the houses and stuff like that. Construction was slow. I was in a dock builders union, it's part of the carpenters, and we went into a recession in the 70s, 74 and 75 and stuff. So I started doing houses in Edgewater, painting and stuff like that, putting fences in and stuff like that. And then I survived that way, you know. And one word to the other. Oh, they did a great job and they're cheap. We always moved over to the next house. Finished that up. I had another house to do. You know, and that was another thing. But we have handymen in the community. Same thing. They're reasonable. I get them jobs all the time. If not, hiring them themselves for my house. Mm-hmm. And so they do great work. They don't whack you over the head the prices. And you have talented people in the community.
How many times did we do repairs inside the firehouse, the meeting room, and did our own work rather than contractors out? We would just get supplies. The one time we actually were training for the masons. They brought in a group of apprentices, and they masoned the building for us.
They pointed the tower and everything. Yeah, and then I got the Boy Scouts. My son was becoming an Eagle Scout, and you had to do a big project. So I got him to paint the apparatus room. All the scouts came out, painted the apparatus room. We needed it done again, and I found another kid who needed an Eagle Scout for his badge. I said to his mother, have him paint the apparatus room.
There you go.
We got the paint donated, the kids come in and painted the place.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you again, and I really appreciate your
thank
time.
you.
Thank you for having us.
Getting this valuable information and these stories down so that other Bronxites, can learn about their own community. Thank you.